Hey guys, it's Kate, and I hope you're having a fantastic day today. I wanted to come in and do a watercolor painting, and I've got my Maybelline palette, and I'm going to come in with some of this violet red and kind of mix some in my pan a bit and just get a nice, good, watery blend with plenty of pigment. And then I'm also going to go into my yellow sienna, which is here on my palette. I had to find it. So I'm just going to get some blended here, right to the side. And today I'm going to be working with gauze. So I had done a watercolor techniques video in my tutorial series on the technique and just kind of going over some basic ways to use it, but I wanted to try it also with a abstract painting. So what I'm going to do is just mix up some colors that I can use for my painting itself, and then we're going to have some fun with some gauze. But I'm going to mix these colors first so I can dip into them easily. So I'm going to rinse my brush and grab my spray bottle. I'm going to work wet and wet on this paper today. So I'm giving it a couple of good sprays, and I'm going to start with this yellow sienna, and I'm just going to put it down pretty gently and just let it sort of flow around the page. And I'm going to start with this as the heaviest coat first. And I want this nice sort of bright mixture of paint on here. Then I'm going to dip into this violet red and start working that in a little bit in some places. And I'm going to even come down to the edge of my paper. And I'm going to leave some white space too. And I don't have too much in the way of muddiness, it seems like. All right. You can see some interesting movement there with the color. I'm just going to add a little bit more water to my paper. And now I'm going to dip into this blue, which I really love. This is a sky blue color in the palette. And one of the things that has been kind of unusual with this paper, this is that 5S paper that I got on Amazon for a deal, and I'm just been playing around with it. But one of the things that is a bit unusual is that it tends to dry fast. It's very thirsty paper, and sometimes the color doesn't really want to move too much, but it's been pretty fun. So I'm just going to keep kind of messing around with it and seeing what we get. All right. I kind of like this. It's sort of colorful and bright. So I think that looks pretty good. It dries pretty quickly. So I'm going to come back into this yellow sienna, and I do like how that blends in some of these spots. And you can kind of see some of the spots where I move my brush around, it doesn't really want to spread that much, and it almost leaves a mark around my brush stroke, but for what it is, it's been pretty fun. So I'm not going to really complain about it, I guess. I've been enjoying using it, and this is in several videos now, so I'm just going to go with it and see what we get. All right. I think what I'm going to do is get another sort of contrasting color. So I've got these couple of pieces of gauze here, and I am going to be putting it on this paper as it dries, but I want to mix up a nice watery bit of color. But I think what I'm going to do is add some deep magenta to this so we can get a really bright, warm red on that front. And we have those blues and purples in the background. So I'm going to add plenty of water because what I'm going to do is dip my piece of gauze right into that paint and kind of mop up what's left in my palette. And this is pretty absorbent, so I'm just going to get it plenty wet. Hopefully that does it. I've got quite a pool of color going on here. So I'm going to dip this in and let it soak up paint right from my palette. I'm kind of moving it around with my fingers a bit, just letting it sop up just like a sponge. And I'm going to have pretty decent coverage. So what I'm going to do with this now is just lay it on my paper, just like that. Then I'm going to clean off my fingers a bit. I'm going to use this side of my brush to press it into my paper so that it has good contact with the surface of my paper, just like this. And some spots might stick, some spots might not, but we'll be able to see how everything dries when we lift it at the end. So I've got one more piece here that I want to do, so I'm going to do some more of that deep magenta and get that color on here and add plenty of water. I'm just going to use my spray bottle for this so I don't have to keep dipping into my jar. I might just move some of this yellow sienna over here, and heck, why not a little bit of this blue. We'll just mix it all together and get a different, slightly different color than what we've got on the other gauze piece. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to dip this in and let it really soak up that paint that's in my palette. And I'm just going to move it around with my fingers and make sure everything gets soaked up. I've got a pretty big piece of gauze, so it's going to have a lot going on. And I'm going to try to kind of arrange this a little bit to make it interesting. So maybe we'll have those there. And I'm going to wipe off my fingers again and then use my brush handle just to really press this into the paper. I don't want to leave fingerprints all over the paper, so I'm just doing what I can to get that contact, just like this. And I think that looks pretty good. Now what I will do is add a little bit more moisture down here. I think I'd like some better contact with this gauze and the paper, so I'm going to just let it soak some fluid off of my paintbrush and sort of let that stick down into the paper. Just like that. And I think we'll get a very interesting texture there when that dries. Sometimes you can get a little bit of a fuzzy. That went right into my palette. So you just kind of get those out too. It depends how much you kind of pull at the gauze, so just keep an eye out for that. But once this is dry, it does not stick. Now, if you are using acrylic ink, it will stick. The acrylic ink will actually bind it like a glue to your paper. So unless you're going to keep this on permanently, I wouldn't recommend that. But with watercolor, it's just fine. It'll dry and just brush right off, no problem. I'm going to let this dry and we'll be back. Okay, we are back and dried completely, so I am going to just pull off this gauze, and you can see it comes off really easily. Just getting a couple little strings that were behind, and we have a really Nice looking pattern. This is all just paint that was left over by that gauze. So I'm going to give you a close-up real quick. You can see where we had the really good contact, where it was a little bit wetter, and you have that stronger grid pattern, and especially where some of these little tendrils were kind of sticking out. And then you have more of a cloudy pattern where it wasn't quite so wet, or if it's on damp paper. So I really love using gauze, and you can reuse this, throw it away, whatever you want to do. And I think the background also turned out really nicely on this piece. So I'm going to add just a little bit more to this. I grabbed my yellow woody, and I'm going to make some marks around this to kind of brighten it up a little bit, maybe even inside. And I'm just going to kind of go around in some random-ish areas. And I love this woody pencil, and it leaves a nice mark even on a darker background. So I'm going to just highlight through here so we can get some extra brightness. Okay, I've got my damp brush here, and I'm just going to activate this yellow. Just like this. And I'm just going to go over it gently with a damp brush, not too much, and just get that spread out on the page a little bit. And I'm going into some of these spots where I also had sort of colored inside of this shape a little bit. And in here, I am reactivating a little bit of that red, and that's okay too. It's kind of a thicker wash of color, so some of it will kind of, you know, re-wet pretty easily on the surface of the paper there like that. I'm just going to make sure I didn't miss any spots. And I love the brightness that this adds to the painting. I'm going to go in here just a little bit and just play around with that. And I think that looks pretty beautiful. What I'm also going to do is pop in with my fine liner. This is a 0.03 tip. And I'm going to trace some of these little grid shapes, just to give it some extra contrast. So I'm going to kind of go into some random areas here and just put in some of these outline patterns that already exist from that gauze that we put down. And I'm going to start slowly and just see how I like it, and then we'll go from there. Now I'm working on a flat piece of paper, even though it really does look close up like there is something on it, but there's nothing. It's just the wonderful paint texture. And so I'm just kind of going inside some of these holes that were left behind and putting in a few marks. And not finding a whole bunch down here, but I'll kind of outline a few of these spots. I'm just kind of pulling back and looking every so often just to make sure that I still like it. And what I might also do is go around the outside of a couple of these areas. And it's just going to increase that contrast more, add a little bit more, I think, interest and texture. And it's kind of just enhancing a few of these spots. And it introduces a little bit of black to our painting. I love these rough edges that we get from our gauze. I'm just loosely following the outline. Okay. And I'm letting my pen be just as loose and jagged as the lines left behind by the watercolor. Okay, and that just adds a little bit of something extra. Okay, now I'm going to go in with my metallic paint marker. This is gold, and I am going to kind of come around where some of these hard edges are and just sort of make a little bit of a jagged sort of line. I'm making dots, but they're so close together, they're kind of forming a line. Okay. I'm just kind of filling in a couple of these little spaces down here as well. It's almost going to look like a little bit of gold leaf. Just kind of in some little random spots. I'm just letting my gold kind of go over here pretty loosely. I think I like this better than the line, but what I might do is turn my line into a bit of an organic shape, just like this, because I kind of like that look. And I might even let it come into my painting a little bit, like that. Same thing up here. I'm just gonna take away some of those harder edges where it follows the line exactly and make it into a more organic shape like we have on the left. Just like that. And then I'm gonna kind of go in just like we did before. Just have some of those little marks that sort of trail off. I'm sort of alternating hardness and softness on my edge, and I'm kind of putting it on its side when I want to make it almost like more of a dry brush or something, because this is a medium-sized tip, and so it definitely can make a pretty thick mark if you press on it or use it, you know, on the full tip. All right. I think this adds a pretty perfect amount of sparkle. Now I'm going to focus on doing a little bit of more organic marks with this. And kind of expanding this out a bit. Let me give you the close-up. And I'm going to tilt it so you can see the shiny stuff too. But I basically just followed down to the edge of the paper, and you can see that really nice mark that the marker leaves behind. And it almost looks like some gold foil here because of the organic shapes of our marks. Up here, I would have done a bit less, but I like how it looks still, and I've got it balanced a bit by this larger area here. So I actually really love how this turned out, and I hope you enjoyed following along with me today, and will hopefully do this yourself. So until next time, keep creating, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.